Hello YouTube. I have been collecting reports about strange cryptids of the Black Sea, serpents, dragons, and so forth. Well, years ago I spent some summers on the shores of the sea. I visited archaeological sites, villages, towns, and collected stories. It was during the Soviet times in Georgia and Ukraine. Now, I have my own research about a small but very interesting island there, and its ancient and continuous secrets. But that's for later, for another video. Today, let's look at the cryptids. Black Sea is a large inland sea situated on the southeastern extremity of Europe. It is bordered by Ukraine to the north, Russia to the northeast, Georgia to the east, Turkey to the south, and Bulgaria and Romania to the west. Black Sea is the second biggest sea in Europe, next to the Mediterranean Sea, and the deepest part is 2,212 meters. Its longest east to west extent is 730 miles. The Black Sea was known under various names in the past. The ancient Greeks, they called it at one time Pontus Ahainos, or the hostile sea, because of its storminess and the lack of islands. After colonizing its coast, the Greeks renamed it Pontus Eohainos, the hospitable sea. Arab travelers and writers called it the Rus Sea, or the Russian Sea. Now, Russian researchers of cryptozoology revealed that the ancient Greek historian Herodotus wrote about a mysterious monster that lived in the waters of the Pontus Eohainos. According to his descriptions, the creature was dark, almost black in color, had a mane, clawed paws, a terrible mouth with huge teeth and burning red eyes. It moved on the surface of the water, much faster than ancient Greek ships. Well, the man known to history as Herodotus, and father of history, is believed to have been born about 484 BC. He was an ancient Greek historian. His history makes it clear that he was curious about everything, and that while well-read, Herodotus preferred to learn firsthand. So he wanted to see foreign lands for himself, talk to the people who lived there, hear their stories, and draw his own conclusions. Therefore, Herodotus traveled the length and breadth of the known world, intending to visit as many countries as he could and meet as many people as possible. Beyond the historical narrative, Herodotus is one of the primary sources for information on ancient lands and peoples, including anthropological, geographical, and other information. It is believed that Herodotus first traveled to the north, which makes sense because of his inquisitive nature. Well, to the south lay Egypt, a country well known to the Greeks, and one with whom there were long and ancient ties. All countries to the east of Greece were still under the Persian control at this time, and to the west Greeks had explored and founded colonies all the way to Massilia. I think we call it Marseille today. The north, however, was a vast unexplored mystery. There were scattered Greek settlements on the coast of the Black Sea, but beyond them the wilderness of Thrace and Scythia beckoned. Well, the coastal areas of the Black Sea had been subdued by the Persians in the sense that they once controlled the coastal cities and could move through the interior with large armies. But the lands in modern-day Bulgaria and Romania were hardly a place to which an unescorted stranger could travel. Herodotus, however, still had the persistent recklessness of his youth, and one or two occasions, probably with experienced guides, armed guards, penetrated the interior to see the tribes that lived beyond the Greek frontier. That's toward where I'm from. Risking a violent and gruesome death, Herodotus continued his voyages around the Black Sea, learning about the peoples in the area. Despite the obvious legends and myths that Herodotus discovered while in Scythia, he also explored truly historic sites. It is believed that Herodotus made one more stops on his voyages around the Black Sea. Herodotus directly states that he went to Colchis or Colchida, and at no other time would he have a better opportunity to visit the site where Jason and the Argonauts retrieved the golden fleece. And here we need to recall ancient Greek myths about the mysterious sea dragon. According to the descriptions of the ancient Greeks, this is a typical dragon, dark, almost black in color, with a large body, a mane-like crest, and a long fleshy tail. It has huge clawed paws, glowing red eyes, and an eerie wide mouth, studded with several rows of sharp and long teeth, shaped like shark teeth, designed to rip huge chunks of meat out of the victim's body. The sea dragon moved on the surface of the water with a huge speed for that time, much faster than the speed of the Greek beremes, sailing and rowing ships, and diving could instantly disappear, going to an unknown depth. Sailors of those times mentioned the gigantic size of the monster. It was larger than the Greek or Phoenician berema. That is, it was more than 20 meters in length. The waves it raised as it moved could be compared to a storm. The dragon let out loud, chilling screams like the trumpet calls of an angry elephant. Well, remember that the Greeks visited the shores of Africa and saw elephants, so there is nothing surprising in such a comparison. The myth of the Argonauts tell of a terrible dragon guarding a magical oak tree on which hung a golden fleece. According to the descriptions, the monster is surprisingly similar to those more than once observed by sailors. And remember, the king ordered Jason to plant the field with the dragon's teeth. But it was not somewhere else, but in Colchis, in Colchida, on the banks of the Pontus Euxenos, Black Sea, just where the sailors claimed that there were dragons. And in general, what good reasons do we have not to trust the notes of the contemporaries of Plato and Herodotus? At the beginning of our era, the scientists in Alexandria, in their writings, also mention the dragons of the Pontus Euxenos. The reality of their existence was not questioned. In the 11th century, the famous encyclopedic scholar Ptolemy wrote about flying dragons tamed in the legendary city of Bar in Arabia, where the monsters guarded the incense plantations. Information about Ubar and dragons is also available in later Arabic sources from the 5th to the 7th century AD. There are many reports of a meeting with a snake-like creature on the Crimean coast in the Black Sea. The most ancient and semi-legendary date back to the 16th century. In the early Middle Ages, the Black Sea dragon was mentioned more than once in reports sent from fortified Byzantine settlements and cities to Constantinople. But the rulers of the empire, who had very capable spies, well, the rulers were not very interested in the sea monster in a distant province bordering the restless Rus or Rus, Russia, ancient Russia and Ukraine. They were overwhelmed by more pressing concerns and did not issue warnings for seafarers to take precautions. When the Greek colonies in the Crimea fell under the blows of the Seljuk invaders and their allies, the Crimean Tartars began to talk about the sea monster. From the 16th to 18th centuries, among the Crimean fishermen, perhaps there was not even one who did not believe in the sea dragon. The captains of the Turkish merchant and warships that regularly sailed between Istanbul, the Crimea, and Azov, which was then a Turkish fortress, reported about it to the Sultan's officials and Admiral Kupudan Pasha. The Turks saw it and they were afraid of it, of that monster. sea dragon, sea serpent, and considering it as a product of shaitan or devil. Long before the conquest of the Crimea by Russian troops, the Don Cossacks went on long sea voyages, breaking past the Azov and through the Kerch Strait, and their enemies ran to Istanbul, and sometimes the Sultan himself hid from the raid of the daring warriors from the steppes. The Cossacks observed the Black Sea Dragon, and these events are reflected in what I understand in the Don tales about the Guardamala La Guardamaca, according to the descriptions exactly repeating the monster observed by ancient Greeks. In the 16th century, captains of military and merchant ships plying the sea between, like I said, Istanbul and Azov, they talk with fear about the Black Sea snake. Sometimes it was actually chasing small ships. Now, Russian naval officers who served under the command of Admiral Fyodor Ushakov also met with the dragons after the Russian troops captured the Crimea and built their ships. In 1828, in the city of Yevpatoria, there was a police officer who reported the appearance of a huge sea snake in the Karadak area to higher authorities. When I was in Yevpatoria, I think this was late 1960s, I've heard stories about people who saw strange things like gigantic snakes in the waters, but I was too little to take notes. Anyway, Emperor Nicholas I, known for his curiosity, having learned about the Black Sea monsters, sent scientists to the Crimea. The Russian emperor was interested in the amazing creatures that frighten fishermen, and Nicholas I ordered that all the amazing phenomena in the empire be reported to him. Having heard about the next appearance of the Black Sea monster, the emperor reportedly said, "Isn't it time for gentlemen scientists to find out for sure the nature of this animal? Does it even exist?" An expedition went to the Crimea, and since the monster was more often seen around Karadag, the work was carried out mainly in that vicinity. As a result, they found an egg that weighed 12 kilograms. It was split. In the split, a head with a crest was clearly visible, apparently belonging to the embryo of the dragon. But Russia's war with England and France began just then. However, the unique finds were not lost, and eventually they got to Kherson, where there still reportedly are in a local museum. Now, I've tried to find that museum, and maybe I will someday, but that's what I know about that story. Now, in 1855, the officers of the two-masted vessel Mercury saw in the water a dark gray creature over 20 meters long, which, making undulating movements, was moving in the direction of Cape Meganom, located in the southeastern part of the Crimea between Feodosia and Sudak. As soon as the brig approached the monster, the monster disappeared under the water. For the next 6 or 7 decades, all the information about the Black Sea Dragon is reduced to private letters, scattered testimonies of fishermen, and never-ending rumors. Most likely, the dragon appeared after the Southern War, or as it was also called, the Balkan War, but then the era of steamboats quickly came about, which could, those boats could scare the animal, and then there were heavy ironclads and cruisers, and then the First World War broke out. By the way, before the Russian Revolution, encounters with the sea monsters were not considered unusual. For example, in the reference book The Black Sea Coast of the Caucasus, published in 1916, it is recorded as a common phenomenon about the periodic appearance of a giant snake at the mouth of the Shahe River. That's in the present-day Krasnodar territory. Now let's look at the German Navy of World War I now. And one observation from their sojourn, so to say, in the Black Sea during the Adriatic War that destroyed peace in Europe and gave impetus to totalitarian socialist regimes that ravaged my motherland. Germany led the way in submarine technology and production. Germany's large, long-range submarines were known as U-boats, a term derived from the word Unterseeboot, meaning submarine boat. Two other classes of submarines, UB boats and UC boats, were also used. They were smaller vessels and did not have as good a range. They were used mostly in coastal waters. The UC boats were used to lay mines in the Baltic, Black Sea, English Channel, and the Mediterranean. It is curious that it was during the period of military operations that the monster appeared again. The captain of the Kaiser submarine, Oberleutnant Günther Prüfer, reported to the command that on one of the summer nights his boat was in a surface position to ventilate the compartments and recharge the batteries. Being on the bridge German officer saw a strange and terrible huge creature, almost silently traversing the waves. Well, the revolution, the sinking of the Russian imperial fleet, the German offensive in the Ukraine, the Russian Civil War, well, clearly we did not have any records of the dragons and serpents and their appearances near the coast or near military vessels. But things changed later. In 1921, a local Feodosian newspaper published an article stating that a huge reptile appeared in the area of Mountain Karadag, and a company of Red Army soldiers was sent to capture it. The population could not fish for fear of the monster. However, after a rather long time on the beach, the valiant Soviet fighters returned with nothing. Russian poet Maximilian Voloshin himself witnessed this and sent a clipping about the reptile to the famous Russian writer Mikhail Bulgakov, and it formed the basis of his novel Fatal Eggs. Very cool novel, by the way. In the 1920s, on the Black Sea coast of Crimea, more than 20 people saw a giant monster that can easily cope with a dolphin. Now, in the 1930s, everything was under the strict control of the NKVD, or the KGB as it was called at the time, but it is worth noting that the highest Communist Party leadership of the USSR preferred to have vacations not in the Crimea, but in the Caucasus areas, although the Russian czars were not afraid of the monster and lived in Livadia. In the USSR, conversations about dragons and such were suppressed by competent comrades or secret police, and the Soviet people visited the Crimean health resorts, those who could get there, blissfully ignorant about cryptids. Now, with the beginning of the World War II in the Soviet Union, news about the sea monster again arrived from the German side, from the captain of the Nazi U-44 submarine, Max Hagen, who observed the Black Sea monster in 1942 during the fierce fighting on the Crimean Peninsula. The battle on the peninsula unfolded from December 1941 to May 1942. Hagen, like his colleague in the First World War, Oberleutnant Günther Prüfer, was shocked by what he saw and reported it to Admiral Donitz. The German saw the monster in the lull between battles during the day in bright sunlight, and his descriptions of the dragon completely coincide with the descriptions of the ancient Greeks. Years go by, Crimea is back in the Soviet Union, Nazis are defeated, and the nation is rebuilding. Joseph Stalin is still in power. The year is 1952, one of the most sinister periods of the communist rule in my country. The following is from the testimony of the writer Vsevolod Ivanov, who observed a mysterious creature. It was in Koktebel on May 14, 1952. The spring of 1952 in Koktebel was cold and rainy. On May 14, after a long cold spell, the weather was calm and warm. Assuming that during the storms the sea threw up a lot of colored pebbles on the shore, Ivanov went again past the Devil's Finger along the gorge of Gaurbach, and then, so as not to waste much time on the difficult descent to the seashore in the Carnelian Bay, on the rock near the tree where you can see the whole bay, the width it's wide, like 250 meters. Ivanov tied a rope and quickly descended with it. The sea was calm. Near the shore, a mullet was playing among small rocks overgrown with seaweed. Further away, about 100 meters from the shore, dolphins were swimming. Standing on the shore, Ivanov noticed about 50 meters from the shore an object that at first seemed to him large, 10 to 12 meters in circumference, a stone overgrown with a brown algae, but the stone suddenly began to move against the current and turned out to be a sea monster. It was very big, 25 to 30 meters, and excuse me, as thick as the top of a desk if you turn it sideways. It was half a meter or two underwater, and Ivanov thought it was flat. The lower part of it was apparently white, as far as the blueness of as blue as the water would allow, and the upper part was dark brown, which allowed Ivanov to take it for an algae. A monster wriggling as well as swimming. Snakes do. That's what it looked like. The writer kept his eyes on the monster. Then the monster turned around again and suddenly raised its head above the water. The head, of the size of an arm span, resembled that of a snake. He still could not see the eyes, which meant they were small. The current carried this creature to the right again. It looked like a brown rock covered with seaweed. One more time. Carried to the middle of the bay, just or near the spot where the writer first saw it, the monster turned again and, turning towards the dolphins, suddenly raised its head above the water. The head was the size of a snake's armspan. Okay, after holding its head above the water for a couple of minutes, the monster turned abruptly, lowered its head into the water, and quickly swam away behind the rocks that closed the Carnelian Bay. Ivanov looked at his watch. It was 3 minutes to 1. So he was observing the monster for a little over 40 minutes. Well, after the appearance of writers and poets, Ivanov and Voloshin in Koktebel, under the impression of their stories through the years, journalists questioned fishermen and found more than 20 witnesses who met this incomprehensible creature in the sea near Koktebel, in the bays of Karadag, and near the eastern coast of Crimea. In May of 1961, the snake was seen by 3 local residents. The fishermen that day were Kondratiev, director of the sanatorium Crimean Primoria, Mozhaisky, and also a chief accountant of the sanatorium, Vostokov. After leaving the dock of the Karadag Biological Station, they turned into the direction of the Golden Gate. 300 meters from the shore, the fishermen saw a brown spot under the water and decided to get closer to it. When it was about 50 meters away, they were horrified to see 3 meters below the surface of the water a huge head of a snake about 1 meter in size. The head was. Kondratiev was the first to recover. He turned the boat around and headed for the dock at a wharf at the top speed. The monster chased the boat for several minutes, but when it was 100 meters away from the shore, it turned around and swam towards the open sea. The boat pulled into the sandy beach at full speed, and the fisherman ran screaming to the biological station. Now, this report. For 15 years, Tamara Nikolaevna Zilberman did not dare to talk about how she saw an unknown creature in the sea. In the year 2003, Tamara Nikolaevna did talk. She lived in the Crimea for half of her life, so she loved the sea and she knew it well. Tamara Nikolaevna, even in her youth, heard stories of old people who had seen the sea devil before the war, but never thought that she would have to see it, this mysterious creature, firsthand. But once, when she was on the shore, well, it happened in August of 1988. That day, Tamara Nikolaevna went to the sea to breathe the healing air. The day was overcast, the sun hidden behind a cloud veil. The sea was calm, but it was cool to swim. So the woman sat down on a concrete breakwater stand at the water's edge. The beach was empty except for a few children playing nearby, about 300 meters away. She saw the devil suddenly. Out of the water, about 400 meters from the shore, a dark silhouette appeared with erect neck, with a head that looked like a snake. A head the size of a sheep, she said, but it's worth noting that it is quite difficult to determine the true size of the objects at great distance. The neck was flat, like that of a horse or giraffe, tapering slightly upward, and according to Tamara Nikolaevna, was about a meter long. The creature's color was a brownish black with a slight dark green tinge, like a seething sea. She recalled that her hair stood on end from fear. She has never seen such a thing and thought, what if it's not the only one? Recalled that woman. Maybe we should run away, she thought, that it should quickly swim to the shore. The being at this time several times looked back and forth, turned its head, looked towards the seashore as a man would stare. That was the witness's impression. Then it looked to the right, looked back in the direction of Feodosia, then forward to the side of Chauda, and disappeared under the water. Tamara Nikolaevna peered intently. What if it swam to the shore? About 2 minutes later, this creature appeared again above the surface of the water, about 100 meters from the place of the first ascent. First time it came up, but this time it surfaced even more, so that a part about a meter of the body, like a thick log, it was visible. No limbs, flippers, fins, or tails were visible. What covered the animal, whether it had scales or fur, also could not be seen. And then the serpent disappeared into the waves again, this time completely. The unknown beast was moving in the direction from east to west, according to Tamara Nikolaevna. Again, it sailed from Feodosia through Primorskaya to Chauda. Tamara Nikolaevna decided not to tell anyone about what she saw, what she observed. She didn't want there to be gossips. It was only when she read in a newspaper in 2002 the testimony of a woman who had seen a sea serpent near Chauda that she decided it was time to tell about her encounter with the incredible inhabitant of the Black Sea. Now, Ivanov's case resembled that of Silberman's, what they saw together. Both snakes were of a similar color. According to the description of Tamara Nikolaevna, the sea devil is black and dark brown, while Ivanov's is dark brown, but the writer saw the creature in clear weather with bright sunlight, which can explain some difference in coloration. The second common detail is the snake's head, the head of that creature. Also, representatives of science, are more than skeptical about the possibility of the existence of fossil animals in our time. Well, however, there is no reason to doubt the veracity of many eyewitnesses. On August 12, 1992, an employee of the Feodosia Executive Committee, Velsky, decided to refresh himself and went swimming in a cove on the eastern shore of Cape Tlama. He did not have the time to swim far from the shore when he suddenly saw the head of a terrible monster 30 meters away from him, which was swimming in his direction. The frightened Velsky quickly swam back. When he reached the shore, he looked back. A few paces away, the head of a huge snake was sticking out of the water, and water was dripping from its gray mane. The eyes of the monster were small, red, and the body was covered with horn plates of dark gray color. There were quite a few cases of people meeting with the Black Sea snake, but unfortunately none of the eyewitnesses could provide material confirmation of these meetings in the form of scales, mane, curls, or at least photos. Although in the mid-1990s, attacks on Black Sea bottlenose dolphins caused panic on the southern coast of the Crimea. The director of the Karadagh Nature Reserve, Pyotr Semenkov, told the correspondent of Crimean newspaper about the discovery that fishermen found in the nets on December 7, 1990. The net was set for catching Black Sea stingrays. It was damaged. When they picked up the ragged edge, they pulled out a dolphin, a Black Sea bottlenose dolphin, measuring 230 centimeters. Its tail was entangled in the net, and its stomach was bitten out in one bite. The width of the bite in an arc was about a meter. Teeth marks were clearly visible on the dolphin's skin along the edge of the arc. The tooth size is 40 millimeters. The distance between the teeth marks is about 15 to 20 centimeters. In total, there were about 16 teeth marks along the arc. The dolphin's belly was bitten out, ripped out with the ribs, so the spine was clearly visible. In the spring of 1991, fishermen discovered another mutilated dolphin. Now it was a Black Sea dolphin Azovka with a length of 1.5 meters. According to experts, none of the known predators of the Black Sea could cause terrible wounds like those. Local resident Alexander Paraskevich holds the tooth of a monster, rotten, red-brown in color, 6 centimeters long. According to a Turkish ichthyologist who analyzed the tooth, it does not belong to any known fish. Well, Alexander Georgievich Paraskevich picked it up a couple of years ago in the rocks near the village of Malý Mayak. The tooth was stuck in a small piece of wood washed up by the sea on the shore. It may have been left over from the late 1930s when a Tatar fisherman was attacked by a monster there. Paraskevich's father told him about how his comrades, who had come to the rescue at the cry for help, had saved the Tatar. Well, the Tatar fisherman was then paralyzed and died a month later. The Black Sea snake has been exciting the human imagination for several thousands of years. These days, some enthusiasts, with the onset of warm weather, they spend days on the coast armed with video equipment. They hope to become famous by being the first to capture the mysterious sea dragon on film. In October 2009, it seems that Husarenko couple managed to do this, and quite by accident. Well, the video is not of good quality because it is made from a long distance, but one can still see a huge serpentine body moving quickly in the water. Here's a report from around 2010. Near Feodosia, a few years ago, the last meeting with a snake took place, according to local historian Alexander Terekhin. Some caves were checked by Turkish scuba divers, and they were afraid to dive unarmed Two scuba divers, a husband and wife, descended from the yacht to a depth of 60 meters. A few minutes after reaching the depth, the husband pops up in violation of all the rules of ascent. With a wild cry, he climbs aboard, pushes his friend aside, and falls to the deck from decompression. The woman, she didn't surface, and all the search for her ended in vain. And the man was brought to the hospital and pumped out, but from the decompression and the stress he experienced, he went mad and was placed in a psychiatric hospital. They said that he was afraid of the dark and constantly raves about some monster. Even relatives were not allowed to see him. The death of that scuba diver, which is attributed in Feodosia to a sea snake, is not the only one. A few years ago, on the eastern shore of Cape Kiik Atlam, right at the edge of the sea, a strong young man in swimming trunks and a mask, a master of sports and swimming, was found dead of a heart attack. As we can see in historical terms, the existence of the monster can be traced for centuries and up to the present day. Attention is drawn to the narrowing of the monster's or creature's habitat. In the last century, it was established from Tarhankut to Karadak, and obviously to the east. Before the Second World War, it was observed in Kuchuk Lambat, at Ayudag and Kazantip in the Sea of Azov. Today, in fact, more or less reliable evidence points to one area, Karadag. However, many oceanologists are extremely skeptical about these stories and eyewitnesses' accounts of the sea dragon or sea serpent, because the Black Sea is about 7,000 years old and there is simply no place for ancient lizards to appear in it. But they forget, Black Sea is the most unique on Earth. Only in it the salinity of the surface water is 1:1 equal to the salinity of a human blood. Yes, the sea is infected with hydrogen sulfide, but on the other hand, it is the most unexplored environment. Sulfur, like oxygen, is in the sixth group of the periodic table and may have an enviable life potential unknown to us. Why couldn't mutations unknown to modern science occur in a hydrogen sulfide environment and at a salinity identical to blood? Though it has been mistakenly named for its color, there has been instances where the water in the Black Sea darkened or at least created a black sludge. During intense storms, the sea appears to look black. Sailors mostly noticed it, especially during the winter when the clouds cover the skies. Thick fog also blocks the sun from penetrating into the waters, thereby making the waters look gloomy. People found old shipwrecks dating back to ancient times. The black sludge covering those boats reinforces the idea of calling it Black Sea. Here's an interesting fact. The upper layers of water do not intermix with the deeper layers of water. That is the reason why it's called meromictic. This condition makes 90% of its deeper part anoxic or empty of oxygen. The oxygen-rich upper layer is not able to circulate below. As a result, marine life primarily exists from the top up to a few hundred meters of its depth. The deeper it goes, the less oxygen it has until it reaches zero from approximately 200 meters. This means that only around 10% of the Black Sea is actually habitable to marine life, unless life forms exist that are truly unknown to us. So I will keep bringing you stories about Eurasian cryptozoology. Please support my research if you can. You will see descriptions to this video. Please tell others about my channel and subscribe. And thank you and be safe.